Boost job, mega mega love shout out. Kalang boost job ha. Boost jobs pala. Salamat na marami, Boss Jobs. Ayusin ko lang yung aking tambay. Tambayers. Agoy. Madam Gulay, mega mega love shout out. Ako si Madam Gulay. Kumusta ka na, Madam? Nakabalik ka na, Madam, sa Bahrain? Part 2 tayo. Part 2 ng ating live. Sana ba yung ating pandikit? Ayan, may ano din si Madam Gulay. Mamaya ipin ko yan, Madam Gulay, ha? At ito na si host, ang part 2 ng ating... Teka, bakit na ba nag-part 2 na pala ito? Tapos na ako nito sa topic na to. Umulit naman tayo. Salamat ng marami. Salamat ng marami. Which of the following is not a critical skill of a successful social media? Talking more than you listen, is staying on the cutting edge, abandoning the failures quickly, doing nothing that you wouldn't want to follow you forever. Ayan, nakachamba. With a blank, the consultant agrees to perform a project to completion for a flat rate. Fixed hourly bid, hourly fixed rate bid, free bid. Free bid. Fixed rate bid. Naku, patay, nanghula na tayo. Exam time ng... Tapos na ako nito. Saan? Saan na ba to? Hala, sa dulo na pala to. Kaya pala hindi natin alam ang ano. Dito na ako sa setting goals eh. Nasa dito na tayo sa itong second video na naputol kanina kasi di ko alam, umiikot yung ating signal kanina na nawala yung ating live. So ito na yung continuation, nasa ano na tayo, setting goals and selecting platforms. Sa topic B, social media goals versus business goals. Ayan.
Now that we've discussed common barriers to adapting to social media, we're going to assume that your organization is prepared to move forward. And the next step is to align your social media goals with the overall business goals. So when creating a strategic plan, you need to understand the organization. What is its mission and its vision? What are its current strategic long-term goals? And are there some tactical short-term goals? Does each department have a set of goals that you need to understand? Is there some point of momentum that we need to carry through, or do we have some problems that need to be addressed? So you need to step back, understand your organization and its current business goals, and then figure out how your social media goals can be used to make all of that happen. We're going to start by identifying something called a key performance indicator, a KPI. This is a value related to a company goal that is worthy of measuring. And so we're not looking at something really vague here, like we just want people to like us more. We're looking at something very specific, like we want to increase our number of blog posts, or we want to achieve a certain number of followers on our Twitter account. Those are measurable, concrete goals, performance indicators, something we can measure. We want to write these down so that we know what they are.
shout
We
out.
want to
Study
work to
time tayo
align them
ngayon,
to our
Ravi.
overall company goals. And then we want to motivate our team members to actually buy in and want to reach this goal. Okay, so I can get pretty excited if I'm very specific about something and I say, I want to make 10 baskets by 5 o'clock. So I'm going to stand here in the gymnasium and I'm going to shoot baskets until I make 10 baskets. That's something very specific, and I can get everyone around me excited about that. They know what I'm shooting for. They can cheer me on. That's what we're talking about. Measurable, concrete, everybody knows what we're trying to achieve goals. Upper management also needs to be very aware of what you're setting as these key performance indicators, and they need to agree to that. Now, in the world of social media and goal setting, we have an acronym that we use called SMART. The S is for specific, M measurable, A attainable, R relevant, and T time bound. So again, getting back to setting a key performance indicator, a goal. The goal needs to be very clear and well defined. It needs to be very precise, something that you can measure. It needs to be something that you can actually achieve. So it needs to be attainable, not something so sky that it's not going to happen. It needs to be relevant. In other words, going back to aligning with organizational goals, it needs to be something that is going to be important to the organization, so it's relevant. And it needs to be time bound. We need to set some sort of deadline for completion. Now let's look at an example. Let's say that somebody comes in and they say, we want to increase the number of followers that we have on our social media platforms. That goal would not be considered SMART. It's not specific, it's not measurable, it's not attainable, it's not relevant, and it's not time bound. So let's work to make it so. Okay, so upper management says we want to increase the number of followers on social media platforms. To make that specific, let's say we want to increase our followers on Twitter. To make it measurable, let's say we want to increase our followers on Twitter from 100 to 1 million. That might be out of reach, so that doesn't make it attainable. Let's step back and increase our followers on Twitter from 100 to 1,000. We'll make it relevant to a business goal. We'll say we want to increase new customers from those followers on Twitter from 0 to 20. In other words, we're wanting to turn them into actual sales. And time bound, let's say we want to increase new customers from followers on Twitter from 0 to 20 by the end of December. So if we put the whole thing together, now our team has something very specific to achieve. By the end of December, we want to have 1,000 followers on Twitter. From those 1,000, we want to try to get 20 to actually buy something from us. This is a very specific social media goal that aligns with our corporate goals of increasing our customers. And it would also be considered SMART. So your job is to step back and design some key performance indicators that meet these SMART specifications. Write them down and share them with your team and upper management to get everyone excited. Once you've set goals and you have determined some key performance indicators, You need to examine those and then look at all of the possible social media platforms that exist and decide which of those social media platforms are going to best help you reach your goals. Let's look at some examples of goals that can be set. Things like traffic generation or brand awareness, increased customer communication or relationship building, entertainment, information distribution. Now I'm going to pick two of these. Let's say that we have set some key performance indicators related to entertainment. That's the broad goal, but we've set some very specific key performance indicators. Perhaps we want to have 3 videos go viral by the end of December. And we want them to be funny and entertaining and give our brand a good reputation for fun and entertainment. Okay, so that is one goal. Another goal is information distribution. Let's say that we want to educate people on a new product. So we've decided that we want to have 50 articles written by the end of December related to this new product. 50 educational articles that are going to distribute information to consumers about our product. Okay, so we've set some very specific key performance indicators. They align with our overall business goals. Now we have to decide what actual social media platforms are going to be best suited to meet these goals. So for instance, for entertainment, we've decided we want videos to go viral. If we're going to create videos, we need a platform that is best for videos. So perhaps we're going to look at YouTube. That would be far better than picking Twitter. Twitter is not known for video content. Okay, so that's an example of picking a goal and aligning a social media platform to the goal. Let's take information distribution. If we're going to have 50 articles about our product, it might be best for us to create a blog. Again, Twitter is not a good environment because you're limited in the number of words per tweet, and we want these to be long, information-based articles. So a blog might be the best platform, even better than, say, Facebook or Google+. So that's why it's so critical that you understand social media platforms, because you need to pick the proper one based on your goals. Now let's talk about the platform selection process a bit. Of course, the first thing you're going to do is find a platform that meets your identified social media goals and objectives. So if you don't have those goals and objectives, you can't pick a platform. You've got to do your goal setting first. Then you've got to determine the types of content that are going to be required to successfully interact with the social media platform. If I'm tweeting, then I'm going to have short, little bits of information, small posts that people can react to. If I'm wanting to educate my consumers about a product, then I'm going to have long, maybe 300 to 500 word articles that I want to post. That's what we mean by types of content. Perhaps we're a company that's all about visuals, so we're going to have some excellent photography about our products or our services, and we want to disseminate those photographs. So perhaps an environment like Instagram would be better. The other thing that you need to do when you select a platform is know the demographics of who's using that platform. If my target market is females ages 60 to 80, then I don't want to pick a platform that is geared towards teenagers, or I'm going to lose my market. So basically, you've got to look at your goals, you've got to look at the platforms, what they offer, you've got to look at your content, what you're wanting to produce, what kind of content does the platform support, who uses this platform, and you've got to continually repeat this process because this is an ongoing situation. Your goals are going to be changing. So one year Twitter might be your focal point. The next year, based on your goals and your content, all of a sudden you might focus more on YouTube or another platform. This is something that you're going to have to do over and over again. Yes, we're talking about strategic planning, but you're going to be strategic planning all the time. So this isn't a one-time process. This is an ongoing process.
Ayun, si Live. Patay tayo dyan, nawala na naman ang ating nightbot. Andito pa naman sa pinang live ko. Topic C na tayo bago mag-quiz. 7 minutes.
In Lesson 1, I talked about the various categories of social media platforms that exist today. So I'm not going to go through those again in detail, but let's just review. There were blogs,
Study time tayo, study
image
time.
sharing sites, geolocation, microblogs, podcasting sites, social bookmarking sites, social networks and social news, knowledge sites, and video sharing sites. Your job as a social media strategist is to know these categories inside and out, and within each category to know which platforms are the most popular and are going to give your organization the most exposure. You need to understand how they work, what they offer, and what the advantages are for your content. Now later in this course, I'm going to pick some of the most popular platforms and show you how those work. But there are a lot of platforms that you need to become familiar with. Now when we're talking about picking a platform, of course popularity is one of our criteria. The most current statistics show that Facebook, YouTube, Google+, Twitter, and LinkedIn dominate the social media environment. Facebook has 60% usage across globally all internet users. So everyone who uses social media, 60% of those people use Facebook. And then the statistics start to drop. Almost 20% use YouTube, a mere 3% use Google+, 3% Twitter, and less than 2% on LinkedIn. However, these are percentages. Let's look at the actual numbers, or you might be misled. If you're looking at platforms based on popularity, you're talking about millions of people. So even though Twitter only has about 3% of overall social media site usage by percentage, that represents 284 million people. So you can't just look at percentages, you need to look at hard numbers, approximate number of unique users. These numbers are always changing, but as of December 2014, what I've done here is given you within each category what social media platform is the most popular and has the most users. So for instance, in the blogging world, WordPress dominates. In microblogging, it would be Twitter. In image sharing, it would be Instagram. In video sharing, it would be YouTube, and so on. So yes, popularity is definitely one of your most important criteria for selecting a platform. But let's look at some of the others. In addition to popularity, you might want to just look at your goals in terms of selecting a platform. Analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the platforms under consideration based on your identified goals. So I've done that here in a grid so that you can see how it would work. I've listed 3 goals: communication, brand exposure, and traffic to my site. And then I've listed 5 platforms that I'm considering. And I'm scaling 1 is poor all the way up to 5, how that platform best serves my goal. So let's take traffic to my site. If that's my goal, LinkedIn only scores a 1 star. That site and its purpose and its type of content would not necessarily drive people out to my external website. Whereas Dig is a platform that very much would give me mechanisms to drive people to my external website. So I give that a 5 star. LinkedIn would only get 1 in relationship to that goal. If I'm going on popularity, I might rank them differently. But if I'm looking at goal-based selection criteria, then Dig would far outweigh LinkedIn. Another type of criteria that you could use would just be content-based criteria. Consider the content requirements of the platform and look at what content you have and match them. So for instance, if you have outstanding imagery, you'll want a platform that will support photographs and images. Do you have the skills in-house to create the content that this platform requires? If I'm working with YouTube, I'm going to have to be able to produce high-quality video. Do I have the skill set for that? Do I have the audio and visual requirements? Do I have a recording studio? Do I have the content writers who could write excellent content for a video? So you have to look at your costs involved in publishing the content, the quality that would be required, how frequently you would need to update this platform, and see if it meets with your goals. Now, in terms of making content-based decisions, again, that very much dictates that you're familiar with the type of content on a platform. So you have to be a user of social media to be a good social media strategist. You can't just know it in your head. You've kind of got to know it in your heart. You've got to be involved. You have to know the audience and the type of content that they react to in order to make this content-based decision. So let's look at some examples from the top 5 platforms. If we look at Google Plus and Pinterest, for example, they both very much would support videos. Whereas Twitter, not so much. You don't see videos, you see links to Vine or YouTube, but you don't see actual videos placed in Twitter, just links out to videos. But if I want to embed a video, I might want to consider Pinterest or Google+. If I'm putting out a job posting, that is very much a place for LinkedIn. But you don't see job postings out on Pinterest. Pinterest is very graphical. You see product photos, you see blog posts, you see quotes and tips, a lot of infographics. So you need to understand, in order to make a content-based criteria decision, you've got to understand the platforms and what they support. Another helpful selection criteria would be demographics. You could pick a platform based on who uses that platform by age or gender, education, income. For example, I've got some statistics here that show the user demographics for social media based on race. We have white, black, Hispanic, and unidentified. If I know that I'm trying to target the Hispanic population, I might want to choose Instagram over Facebook because it has a larger Hispanic population that uses that platform. So we've looked at popularity, goal-based criteria, content-based criteria, and now demographic-based criteria. As you're making the decision about what platform will help you meet your goals, you might want to consider all of these different criteria.
Teacher Pearl. Ayan o, yung ating exam. Sorry, you failed. Nanghula-hula eh. Ulit, 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 ulit. O, pangatlong. Uy. Sana wala si Allison. Naback natin si Allison. Wait lang. Wala pa'y tulog. Wala pa'y tulog. May customer para man ako maya-maya sakit ng ulo ko. Ay, Diyos ko po. Pangatlong ano ko na to. Pangatlong bagsak. Which of the following is not a barrier to social media adaptation? Sakto yung sagot ko dito kanina. Fear. Hindi. Resistant to change. Yan. Hala. Mali na naman. Patay jud tadani. Fail na naman tayo nito. Which of the following is a characteristic of corporate culture? Make adaptation. Resistant to technology. Not cause supportive of do not expect resistant. Ito tama yung sagot ko dito kanina. Yun. Kaloka. So tayo ay ano to, hindi to siya YouTube. Part ito ng YouTube. This is ano siya, Teacher Pearl. Ito ay social media marketing. Kay pinag-aralan ko kung paano magpalago ng ice candy business. Ito ay all about social media. Kung meron kang iniisip na negosyo at gusto mo gamitin ang social media para doon mo siya isi-set up ang iyong business, itong course na to ay para sa'yo. Yun. So, kanina, yung friend ko sa Saudi, nagpalipad siya ng 4 Saudi Riyal. Pang-start ko daw ng negosyong ice candy na walang flavor. Sabi ko ay hindi, yung magbibenta na lang ako ng laman kay kulang ang puhunan. Nakatatlong bagsak na ako ngayon. Nakikinig sa video tapos hindi pumapasok sa utak. So which of the following is the value related to a company goal that is worthy of measuring in order to demonstrate how effectively company is achieving? So, key performance indicator. Ayan. Ayan, tama na rin kahit papano. Which of the following is part of the acronym SMART referencing social media goals? Specific, measurable, relevant, all of the above. Submit. Ayan, correct. Malay mo, lalago yung ating negosyo ng laman. True or false? Ay, ito ay false. O, diba? Finish. Ayan, nakapasa din tayo kahit papano. Permi na lang dadani second take sa atong exam. Oy. Finish. Then, ang next topic, pang ano ko na to na topic? Pang-4. Ito, wide area network. So, ito na yung pang-4, ay course 5. O, kasi nakatapos na ako nitong Rise of Social Media. Yan, 100%. Conducting Market Analysis. 100%. Yung iba hindi pa pumasok. Auditing social media, hindi pa pumasok yung tapos ko na yan. Setting goals yun kanina. Ngayon, nandito na tayo sa wide area network. Then, topic A niya, social media policy. So, may mga polisiya ito. Ayan yung mga tungkol sa mga copyright. Kapag ikaw ay ayan, context for social media policy. Topic A demo utilizing content. Topic B Creative Commons. Yan yung mga copyright to na topic. Then may quiz ulit. Then ang pang-anim na dito is integrating marketing strategies, yun ng branding na mag-create ka na ng trademark. Kasi actually, pinanood ko na to ng buo. Tapos, gusto ko siyang i-share para maraming matututo. Kasi isa to sa ang YouTube, isa sa platform ng social media, ang YouTube. Ang YouTube, pwede kang, pag naka-reach ka na ng ilan yung subscriber na ma-reach mo, 10K ba yun? Mag-open sila ng merchandise. Meron silang ipo-provide na website na mag-ano ka lang ng design mo doon. Sila nang bahala lahat na So, pwede mo din siyang magamit yung pag-YouTube para mag-start ng iyong negosyo. Na ayun na nga, negosyong laman. Ayan. Ang next, meron developing effective content. Ayan, paano ka maggawa ng na content na epektibo para doon sa iyong ima-market na laman nga. Ayan, understanding the popular platforms, launching successful campaign. Sa Facebook, talagang doon sa Facebook, marami talagang doon, maraming mga nakapag-start ng business doon sa Facebook. Sa Facebook, sa Twitter, sa Instagram, yun nga lang. Depende yun sa kung anong product na gusto mong i-market. Kapag ang product mo okay lang naman na more on mga picture to picture, ayan, may mga platform na picture sharing katulad ng Pinterest. May mga platform naman na video sharing, more on video sharing katulad ng YouTube. So ito ay in general, it's a course about social media marketing. Yan. Tapos, ayan, kasi ito yung, ang pinaka goal magiging social media strategist career. Yun yung trabaho mo. Sana tayo? So, wide area. Topic A. Social media policy. Sige, anuhin natin to. It's 17 minutes.
In this lesson, we're going to be discussing legal terms and situations that can lead to possible litigation. So be aware that while this lesson is an overview of common situations that can arise in social media, it is not written by lawyers. I am not a lawyer. And so any statements or recommendations or best practices and guidelines that we offer are not intended as legal advice. If you have any questions on the topics we're going to discuss in this lesson, you need to pursue legal advice from a lawyer with experience in social media. I'm going to begin by defining the social media policy. A social media policy is an actual written document that a business creates to clearly outline how things should be handled by your social media team and other people in your organization related specifically to social media activities. This document is going to dictate what's acceptable employee behavior in various situations. It's going to safeguard your company against legal risks that might be raised when employees are representing the organization and your brand in public. You want this document to be in place as proof that the organization is not at fault if and when something might happen. If something happens that is negative to your organization, we've already discussed the importance of facing it head on. An organization will typically apologize for what happens and make a statement about an incident violation, and note that the violation went against their social media policy. They want to take actions to rectify this, which might include firing the employee that's involved. So an organization needs this document to back up their actions so that they can state that they're doing everything they can to avoid problems in the future as well. An organization that does a good job of interacting with social media doesn't necessarily dictate to their employees with a whole series of rules how things need to be handled, but they need to have some broad policies in place that undergird employee activity so that employees are clear about expectations. So we're talking about not just employees, but people who represent your organization that might be vendors or agencies or subcontractors. Anybody who has a finger on social media that might be construed as representing your brand need to be governed by this social media policy. The policy is going to cover all sorts of things, including how a blog post needs to be written, how an employee needs to represent the brand and possibly disclose relationships with the organization, confidentiality, ethics, acceptable use of various platforms, types of responses that should be provided to customers or clients or even coworkers, how we should monitor commenting. All of these things are going to be covered in the social media policy, but in order for you to understand what needs to be included in this document, we're going to now discuss various legal issues and laws that are in place that are going to be embedded in the social media policy. We're also going to look at some actual examples out on the internet of places where this policy could come into play. Now, although we'll be discussing many legal issues that need to be covered in your social media policy, there is far more to know than what we'll be able to talk about in this lesson. So you need to do your own research, and one of the organizations that helps you in this process is called socialmedia.org. I'll be talking about that organization in more detail in a moment, but what they've provided that's so valuable is a series of checklists to make sure that you've covered everything in your social media policy. There are three broad guidelines that you're covering. One is the requirement of disclosure and truthfulness in all social media outreach. The second is the monitoring of conversations and the correction of any misstatements. And the third is creating social media policies and training programs. The checklists provided in this toolkit help ensure that all key requirements and risk factors are considered in your social media policy. Now let's look at some specific laws and regulations that are in place surrounding social media, and we're going to begin by talking about truth in advertising. Now, this is a regulation put forth by the Federal Trade Commission, which is the federal government agency in the U.S. to protect consumers from unfair or deceptive practices. Depending on what country you're in, you need to know the laws and regulations that govern your own country. But in the United States, we're governed by truth in advertising regulations, and these revolve around three basic issues. The first has to do with endorsements, and these endorsements of a product have to be truthful and not misleading. The law says that if an advertiser doesn't have proof that the person endorsing the product represents what consumers will achieve by using the product, then the ad must clearly and conspicuously disclose the generally expected results in the depicted circumstances. And finally, if there's an actual connection between whoever is endorsing a product and the marketer of the product, that has to be. In other words, if I work for a company that makes a product and I am creating an endorsement for that somewhere on social media, I have to disclose the fact that I am an employee, that I am related to the company that produces the product. So how should this play out, this knowledge of the truth in advertising regulations, how should that play out in your actual social media policy? Well, you need to have a portion of your policy that governs online endorsements and testimonials. If employees are going to post anything about your company's products online, they need to be told that they have to identify themselves as employees of the company. It's your job to stay up to date on these regulations and read about current litigation and current trends in social media so that you keep this policy up to date. The other thing is you have to have something in place to periodically audit your content and all of the posts that are happening. We've talked about some tools that help you keep track of trends and metrics, but you've got to actually monitor physical posts, including comments, for violations of your own internal social media policies and the laws and regulations of, in this case, the United States. It's your job as a social media strategist to educate all your stakeholders. And what do we mean by stakeholders? This is anybody who touches your organization. A stakeholder could be a board member, it could be an employee, it could be a spouse of an employee, anyone who has a stake in your organization. You have to educate all of them in your organization's policies and regulations. Now, finally, the bottom line is you need to have an overall umbrella policy that requires people to disclose any material relationships that they have with your organization. Let's turn our discussion to intellectual property. According to the World Intellectual Property Organization, this is defined as any creation of the mind, such as an invention or a literary and artistic work, some sort of design or symbol, a name or an image. Any creation that is used in commerce would be considered intellectual property. So there are laws that govern intellectual property to protect the owner, and we're going to talk specifically about copyrights, patents, and trademarks. I'll start by talking about copyrights. A copyright is a legal concept that gives creators of a work ownership over their property. Anything that's original to you is your ownership. Nobody else can take that content and benefit from it, especially financially. Now, if you create something, it is yours, and you have the rights to sell that copyrighted work to someone else, and the rights to that copyrighted work to someone else. And at that point, they own the copyright and get the protections of copyright law. So once an owner or author of a work has sold it, it's no longer their work to control. Now, you can actually formally register your copyright with the United States government, and that'll create something called a registered copyright. When people or organizations register copyrights, that gives them a record that can be verified in the case of a legal battle. Basically, they can look at the registration date and the content in question, and if there's some sort of infringement, it gives them a legal claim to that content. So that's what a copyright does, and there's a symbol that you'll see next to content, a little letter C with a circle around it, that is often used to distinguish the copyright on a work. But just because you don't see that symbol does not mean that the content is not copyrighted. So in this case, we might be talking about a photograph in the realm of social media. You oftentimes see people taking a photograph and utilizing it, and the question is, do they have rights to use that photograph? So photographs, music, articles, those are all examples of copyrighted materials. The second form of intellectual property that we want to talk about would be an invention, something physical that you can actually assign a patent to. And a patent is legal coverage for the exclusive right to that invention. So for instance, if I invent a new product and I'm going to begin manufacturing that and selling it, I would want to make sure that I am not infringing on an already existing patent. If someone else has already patented a similar product, I need to make sure that I don't infringe on their rights by making my product so similar to their product. A third example is a trademark, and a trademark is usually distinguished with a little TM. A trademark is oftentimes a symbol or a mark, a sign of some sort that is distinguishable about a good or service that one organization is going to use. An example would be the Nike swoosh that you see as part of their logo. They have a trademark on that symbol, and so I would not be able to use that Nike swoosh as my logo for a competing product or even an unrelated product because that actual symbol has been trademarked legally. A registered trademark often has a little letter R with a circle around it, or a regular trademark will have a little TM. So you can register a trademark with a government entity such as the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and get that symbol to legally appear adjacent to your trademark. Anybody, again, who registers their trademarks have then a verified record of the registration date and the trademark item, but you don't have to register your trademark in order to have claims to a trademark. It just simply gives you an actual physical record. So we need to know these definitions, and we need to understand the umbrella of these laws so that when we're working with social media or anybody in our organization is working with social media, we're aware of existing protections that we cannot violate. Now that we understand intellectual property and we know that certain content is protected by law, we need to talk about how it is that you could gain permission to utilize copyrighted materials. Keep in mind that users of social media are oftentimes not aware of the laws regarding these matters, and so often unknowingly, they will copy an image or music or video or copy specific verbiage from a blog, and they are breaking the law, but they're completely unaware of it. You have to educate the people in your organization about the law. There is a concept in the law called fair use that does allow for reproduction of some copyrighted material. The uses, though, are very narrow in margin, and they don't involve making a profit at all. So some examples would be if you're going to write a blog in criticism or commentary about something, you can utilize that material. If you're going to report in the news, so a news organization can utilize copyrighted material in the context of making it a news item. Also, if you're in academia and you're going to use the material for teaching or research purposes, there's a narrow margin of capability to use copyrighted materials. Now, again, you need to know the legalities on a case-by-case basis, but fair use is an option. If you are a for-profit organization, however, probably fair use is not going to apply because in commercial cases, you're trying to make a profit, you're benefiting from someone else's copyrighted material. It probably doesn't fall under the fair use umbrella. Now, keep in mind also that we're talking about actually utilizing content inside of your own content. We're not talking about sharing something. I will in a moment show you the difference by going Facebook, but I am going to make the point to you that if you're a person who's utilizing a social media platform, let's take Facebook for example, and you post a picture of, let's say, your family, by just the mere fact that you're on Facebook and you've posted the picture, you give up a certain number of rights based on their own usage policy. You are, by the very nature of posting there, giving your friends the right to share that picture with their friends. And so you need to be aware of the usage policies, the umbrellas that cover these individual social media platforms, but be aware that that's sharing content. And if I share an article, that's different than me copying and pasting, downloading, and pretending that that content came from me or originated from me. If I share something, I'm just passing it along, but I'm giving acknowledgement to the original owner. So those are two totally different things. Now, we are going to talk about two ways that you can legally use protected content, and is to actually buy out the copyright owner's rights completely so that you become the new owner of that content. The second way is to obtain what we call a license to use the content. And in a moment, I'm going to take you to a site that allows you to license photography. So you do have some avenues for gaining permission to use protected content, but without that permission, just keep in mind that you need to know whether your use falls under the fair use umbrella or whether you're breaking the law.
mega love shoutout sa 4 million in the house. Tingnan natin kung mag-open yung video na yun.
In order to set the stage for what we're going to be discussing in this lesson, I want to take you out on the internet and show you some contexts in which social media policies could become very valuable. I'm going to open up my browser and start by going to Amazon.com. Amazon is a very popular website for ordering products, but one of its key features is the ability for customers to review products that they have ordered on Amazon so that other customers can benefit from those reviews. I myself use this a lot, and in fact, I have twin 7-year-old boys who recently became interested in building things with straws. So this past Christmas, I typed straw toys into Amazon, and I found this product called Straws and Connectors Building Kit, and I wanted to learn a little bit about it. So I drilled into the product, and I noticed that it has a 4.5-star overall review rating, which is pretty high, and 67 different customers have reviewed the product. There have been some questions posted on Amazon about the product, and there are 3 answered questions. So I drilled into the customer reviews, and in fairness, just so you know what my mindset is, I usually start with the lowest reviews to see what people don't like about a product. So I'll go into the 1-star reviews, and I'll read about why people might not like this product. And then I usually go to the 5-star reviews and I read what they do like about the product. Now, the reason I've taken you to this area is I want you to think about some possible scenarios that could impact the reviews of a product on Amazon. What if I am a competitor of this product and I want to hurt this company? I could create an Amazon account and pretend that I've ordered the product, or actually order the product, and post a negative review, regardless of what I actually feel about the product, just to harm this company. Or, let's say I work for this company. I could do the opposite. I could create an account and create a 5-star review or multiple 5-star reviews to try to boost the ratings of my own product. Now, this has actually been a problem on Amazon in the past, and if you go out to Google and do a few searches, you can read some of the litigation that revolves around this issue. So how do we avoid these problems? How do we avoid getting our brand or our organization in trouble if one of our employees were to do something like this? That's the kind of issue that the social media policy you create is going to address. Now let's look at another website. I'm going to go over to the Huffington Post. This is a news-based site, and they allow people to post blogs on their site. One of the most valuable are the product review blogs. And so here, a gentleman named Adam has reviewed the waterproof Sony Xperia Z2 tablet, and he litters this blog with his own perception and opinion about this product. And obviously, he views it as more favorable than the iPad, because all you have to do is look at the title. Waterproof Sony Xperia Z2 tablet reminds us why the iPad no longer is king. And so I could read this blog and learn about this product, and it might very well convince me to buy one of these tablets. Now the question again is, who is Adam in relationship to this product? Is he an employee of the company that produces the Sony Xperia? Is he an independent reviewer who is being completely neutral? Is he part of a competitor organization? These are issues that need to be disclosed. And if Adam knows the law, he's going to properly or improperly handle this blog post on the Huffington Post site. And the organization that represents Adam, that sits behind him, could be held accountable for his actions. Let's go to a third location. Here I am on the apple.com website. They offer discussion forums where people can discuss their products and get support from fellow members of the community. And here I am in the Using iPad community, and you can see that people post questions. Here's somebody who said, how do I transfer photos on iPad to a flash drive? And then you go in and people respond to that in the community. We call this a discussion forum, also a very relevant part of the social media world. Again, we could have a situation where someone tries to be negative inside of a forum to put the iPad in a negative light. Apple needs to be aware if their own employees are doing something to undermine their product or to give false information in some way. So I've given you 3 different contexts in which there could be legal ramifications for actions, not only by an employee, but by somebody outside of your organization who is pretending to represent your organization. The other issue is you could have somebody who's giving false information and who is actually damaging your organization and they have no connection to you directly. What does the law say about that, and what rights do you have to protect your organization? So these are the things that we'll be looking at inside of this lesson.
Ayan, tapos na ang ating video.
I want to take you to the socialmedia.org website so that you know where you can find these checklists, and I want to also give you a few other resources from this website that would be very helpful for you. So I'm going to open up my browser. I'm already on socialmedia.org, and you'll notice right on the home page it says that this is an organization for large companies who run social media operations. I'm going to start by going over to the organization's blog, and you'll see very quickly that they are geared towards large organizations. Remember, blogging was one of our social media platform categories, and blogs can be extremely valuable. Here's where you can read about this organization, and they have separated their blog into categories. They have a news area, and here they welcome members, and you can see they work with very large organizations, ExxonMobil, Burger, Toyota. And they are giving you news about upcoming events that this organization offers. But what I wanted to show you was the area called profiles. What they've done here is they have profiled different members that work with their organization, and they interview them, and this is very valuable. These blog articles help you get some insight into what these large companies are doing in the world of social media and how some of their key players are handling things. So lots of valuable insight there. Also, they have a segment of blogs called How We Did It, where they specifically interview and highlight programs at these large organizations related to social media. Here's an example where they sat with someone representing Michelin, and they talked about how they're leveraging online communities to create what they call influencer programs for their brands. So there are lots of blog entries that would be valuable to you. But on this site, where you want to go to locate your checklists, what they call their best practices toolkit, is all the way at the bottom in the footer area. And there is a link called Disclosure Toolkit. Now what that does is it takes you to an area of their site that talks about this toolkit and the fact that it's open source, so anyone can download these and use them. There's no charge, and you don't have to be a member of the organization to benefit. And there is a lot on this page, so I'm going to just highlight a few things. First of all, they talk about how best to use this toolkit, things like training and using the checklist to make sure your social media policy has everything in place. They have a frequently asked questions area. And then they start with the checklist. So let me give you an example of these tools that are available to you. First of all, they have a checklist for disclosure of identity. And this is giving best practices for how your employees or agencies that represent your organization should disclose their identity when they're using social media, so that people know that they represent the organization. And that keeps them from getting in trouble if they post a review, for instance. People then would know, hey, I'm reviewing this product and I am actually an employee, so they're disclosing that information. Here's a checklist on personal and unofficial social media participation. In other words, this would govern how your employees are allowed to behave on social media when they're not representing your company, but they're just representing themselves. Checklist 3, social media outreach campaigns. All the laws and regulations related to truthfulness. Here's a checklist related to advocacy programs, and another one related to compensation and incentives. This would cover things like a blogger who is sent a product for free by a company, and the temptation would be, since you've received this product for free, to give them a good review simply because they gave you a free product. And so disclosing that information to the audience would be valuable so that they know, hey, this person actually was given a product to review, and they know that information. So this governs all of those types of things. Okay, so I just wanted you to know how much information is out here. There are a number of checklists that you can download and start utilizing to formulate your policy. So everything that I'm about to talk about, you don't have to feel like you're overwhelmed. You have a resource that will remind you of everything that you need to cover. I'm now going to take you to the internet and show you some examples of how we utilize content day in and day out that may or may not be a violation of copyright laws. I'm going to open up my browser, and I want to show you how easy it is to just grab a photo from the internet. And I'm going to use an example that I use a lot when I'm teaching graphics applications. So when I'm teaching Photoshop or Illustrator, I oftentimes go out on Google and I do a search on Elvis. And when I do a search, I switch over to images, and I will oftentimes go in, I use this one a lot, to an image of Elvis, and I'll right click and save that image to my computer. So I just do a save image as, and I'm actually downloading that image of Elvis to my desktop. And then I incorporate it into a drawing as I'm teaching someone how to use Photoshop or Illustrator. Now, I don't gain from that in any way. I am not publishing it. I have no financial gain. I'm just teaching someone how to manipulate a photograph, and I would rather look at Elvis than, say, a butterfly while I'm doing it. So I use an image of Elvis, but I am not allowed to take this image and utilize it for my own purposes. It is copyrighted material. Someone else took this photograph. It's their property. And this is how easy it is with technology to violate copyright law. So you have the option to license photographs, and I'm going to take you to a site called istockphoto.com just to give you an example of how someone could legally utilize a photograph inside of their social media posts. So let's say that I'm wanting to write a blog about bull riding, and I am in iStockPhoto, and I'm going to do a quick search on bull riding. And this site comes up with a variety of artwork. Here's Santa riding a bull related to bull riding. So maybe I really like this image that someone has drawn of a cowboy riding a bull. Notice iStock has put a watermark symbol across that image so that if I were to download it right now and try to utilize it, that watermark would be part of the image, letting someone know that I am not the legal owner of that image. But how can I become the legal owner of that content for my purposes? Well, I'll have to buy licensing rights. So if I drill into that image, notice that iStock says if you buy 3 credits, and a credit is purchased on the site ahead of time so that you have buying power. Credits can range in cost from $20 for a credit. Sometimes they have deals to much higher. So I have to buy 3 credits in order to download the vector illustration of this cowboy riding the bull. That gives me what is called a standard license right there. And there is another type of license called an extended license. I'm not going to get into those details here, but I just want you to see that by purchasing this image from iStock, I am given licensing rights to utilize it in my materials. And those materials don't have to just be under the fair use laws, but they could be for money-making purposes. Okay, so that is one mechanism for being able to legally use content. Now, I want to take you over to Facebook for a moment. And I'm on my Facebook account. And I want to talk a little bit about what we mean by sharing. Because right now, if I were to add a photo of my own to Facebook, I'm allowed to do that. It's my photo. And if I go out and I find an article that I'm interested in, I am allowed to share it on Facebook. That is different than you downloading content and pretending that it's your own. So I'm going to go over to this article. This is an article on a site called thepaleodiet.com. Someone else wrote it, it's not mine. And so let's say that I highlight a paragraph out of this article, and I copy that. And I go over to Facebook, and I start writing an article of my own, and in the middle of that article, I paste the paragraph as if it were my own. I've just broken the law. I've stolen something. I have not shared it. I have taken it and incorporated it into my own content post. Now I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to go back over to the article. And I want to scroll to the top of this article and show you some buttons that you've probably seen embedded in a lot of websites today. These are, we call these sharing buttons. And so at the top of this article, if I really like this article, and I want to share it on Facebook, I have a mechanism to make that really easy right here. So I'm going to click this Facebook icon, and it automatically creates a post and allows me to add my own comments to it. So I could say, this is really good, and hit share link. And now I'm going to take you back over to Facebook, to my profile, and you'll see that the post is there. I've posted this article to my Facebook account and commented that it's really good. If somebody who is a friend of mine goes to my profile or looks at my timeline and sees this and clicks on it, they're going to be taken to the paleodiet.com website where they can read the original article for themselves. I simply shared something, passed it along, gave people a mechanism to get to something easily. And so there is a lot brought to bear here. From your vantage point, as a social media strategist, you want your own content to be easy for people to share. That's a whole other matter. But you also want to make sure that your own people, if they are going to utilize content from another site, that they properly share it, legally share it, and don't incorporate it as if it's their own content. Now, this process of creating these share buttons, that's a programmatic issue. Your website designers are going to have to build that capability, but I want to show you that there are tools available for that. I'm going to take you to a site called sharethis.com. There's another one called addthis.com. And this organization provides a quick and easy way to embed these share buttons into your site. So you can get the code, and they call them little widgets, and you can add that widget easily into your site design. Here's an example. If you notice, as I scroll down on their site, on the left-hand side, here's a little sharing widget that stays there even as I scroll for sharing to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on. So watch, as I scroll down, that widget remains in the left-hand side. And so you'll see these on all sorts of sites. Let's go, for instance, to the CNN website, another news site, just so that you can see how different these look on each site. But they're there because they're such a critical part of our lives now. All right, so let's say I go down here and I want to read this article that says Apple patents flexible iPhone. I'll click on it, and that's relevant to what we're discussing because it has to do with legal patents. They've patented an invention so that other people can't steal it. But look, at the top of this article, I can see how many people have shared it to Facebook, how many people have shared it to Twitter, to LinkedIn, and those buttons allow me to share this myself. Okay, so we've seen multiple things here. We've seen how easy it is to steal content, and so that you understand how it is that people inadvertently or even intentionally do that. But we've also seen that there are mechanisms for legally utilizing content, such as iStock photos. And we're now going to turn to an organization called Creative Commons and talk about other mechanisms for legally sharing content. I showed you an example of purchasing a license to be able to utilize some intellectual property. But what if you don't want to purchase a licensed work? There is an organization called Creative Commons. It's a nonprofit organization, and it has come about to support the content creation community. Basically, there are some folks who have created content that they don't mind being utilized by other people under certain conditions. So they want to protect their materials, but they also want to extend some rights to other people without charging. So this organization manages that process. They facilitate the free and easy to use copyright licenses that provide a public way to share and yet use protected content. So what happens is the owner of content decides what kind of copyright coverage they want, and they essentially license their work with Creative Commons. And they indicate what type of use they will allow for their copyrighted material. For instance, they can require what is called attribution. In other words, you can utilize my material if you will attribute it to me whenever you use it. So I could use that picture of Elvis as long as I say who took the photograph. They can also specify how they want the work to be used. For instance, they can say, I'll allow you to use my content exactly as it is, or they can say, I'll allow you to use my content as it is, or modify it a little bit to make it your own. They also have the capacity to say under what circumstances the content can be used. So for instance, they could say, I want you to only use this for non-commercial endeavors. You can't make money off of my content. So Creative Commons is an actual organization. It's not part of the government, and it allows users to register their content and assign a license coverage according to these 3 different identifications. Now, what that means is you, as a user of content, can go to their site and you can actually search for something that you're looking for. Now, I want to show you what the visual license agreements look like. There are some visuals that you will see next to content that are Creative Commons specific that indicate what type of license is associated with the content. So for instance, if you just see a little circle with a person inside of it, that means that this is a license to use this work as long as you will always attribute it to the original owner. And I have a list of all of the different licenses from Creative Commons. I'm not going to go through each one, but some of them are very, very narrow in scope, and some of them allow free reign. And these are all free. You're not paying either to license in Creative Commons or to use the content that has been licensed through Creative Commons. This is a nonprofit organization. Another legal issue that you need to be aware of is called brand abuse. We already defined our brand as our identity earlier in the course, but what we're referring to here is the abuse of our brand. If I'm a company and I've already established my brand with an audience and they trust me, what happens is other people who are trying to be deceptive can do things to take advantage of the hard work that we have done to create goodwill for our brand. An example would be brand jacking, where somebody specifically and deceptively hijacks our brand in order to sell their own products. An example might be somebody who manufactures a new cracker and they create a logo to go on the box of crackers that looks deceptively like Nabisco's logo. And Nabisco already has a reputation for their great crackers, and so this person is just trying to piggyback on that success and sell more of their crackers. So that is an example of brand jacking. And that's actually illegal. However, it's very difficult to find those occurrences. They could be happening anywhere around the world, and you have to be monitoring all social media for occurrences of brand jacking. An example that happened back in 2014 was with the Heinz company, Heinz ketchup. The Heinz company was brand jacked by a Twitter user in the UK who was pretending to be an employee of Heinz and was beginning to write tweets about the Heinz products, pretending to be a representative of the company, and he was gaining quite a following. The problem was he was not a Heinz employee, and he was not authorized to be making the statements about the product and the brand that he was making. So that was a prime example inside of social media of brand jacking, somebody who gained a following by hijacking a brand's popularity. Another example of brand abuse would be cyber squatting, and this is the practice of basically abusing trademarks, but within the domain name system. Now, the domain name system is the system where people buy domain names or URLs for their company. So, for instance, Heinz might own Heinz.com. Well, the problem is that there are a lot of extensions to domain names. There are .org extensions, and now there are some really interesting extensions, for instance, .clothing. And so somebody recently purchased Adidas.clothing, and they were not part of the Adidas organization. So basically what they were doing was sitting on that domain name. They grabbed it while it was available, and they're hoping that Adidas is going to pay them a large sum of money to get control of that name. So it's called cyber squatting. They're basically squatting on a name, holding it, ransom essentially, for money. Okay, and this is also used in variations called typo squatting, where somebody will take the name of a company and just change one letter perhaps. For instance, Coca-Cola, they might purchase Coca, C-O-K-A instead of C-O-C-A. So just a little typo, but it sounds the same, and they might buy that name and do things with it, hoping to get popularity for their site based on people accidentally misspelling the word or search engines indexing that site with the popularity level of a regular Coca-Cola site. So these are examples of brand abuse that you need to be monitoring for your own brand across all social media platforms. If you recall, when we were discussing potential barriers to adapting social media in an organization, one of those barriers was a fear that proprietary information or trade secrets might get leaked via social media. And that's a valid concern. We want to define specifically trade secrets. That's a legal term for any information that is essential to the core business practices of an organization. So an example might be a secret recipe or the way a manufacturing process occurs. It could also be inside information about the way finances are handled. And so these trade secrets are supposed to be protected by an organization. And in fact, the law is very clear that trade secrets are predicated on the organization taking reasonable measures to keep those secrets. So what would happen if someone on the organization's social media team posted something related to a trade secret, the company can no longer argue that they were taking reasonable precautions, and they lose some of their protection under the law. And so this is why your social media policy needs to very specifically address trade secrets and how the law operates so that your employees understand what they should be doing and shouldn't be doing. Keep in mind, too, that once information appears on social media, it tends to move very quickly. It gets propagated quickly, it gets shared quickly, and once it's on the internet, it really can't be retracted because it gets put so many places. It's essentially there for eternity. Let's talk about some of the things that should not be released that would be considered proprietary information. Examples would be anything that would be an inside scoop on a company. An employee might write a blog and they're actually providing some insider information. That would be a no-no. Releasing things like customer lists or customer profile information would not just be a violation of potential trade secrets, but also of consumer privacy. And the other thing that relates to that is financial insights. The SEC violations that would stem from providing financial insights could be massive. You should not divulge results of research data or share any information about existing business deals or pending business deals. If there's going to be a partnership between your company and another company, that information should be held as proprietary information. As I mentioned earlier, some organizations manage this very tightly by creating a position called a release manager. And essentially, this person acts as a gateway for all content out on social media. They monitor all content and essentially edit all content to make sure that nothing proprietary is included. You could have someone in that position, or you could simply train the entire social media team on these legal issues, or you could do both. But the bottom line is you need to do something in your social media policy to protect your proprietary information and to mitigate risks if something were to happen to be leaked. As part of your social media policy, you need to think about creating a privacy policy as well. The privacy policy enforces consistently how you handle private information gleaned not only about your own employees, but about your consumers, your customers. This could include how they utilize your website, their address information, their credit card information, their buying information, their history, anything that would be considered private information. There are no specific laws or regulations that govern how social media sites have to safeguard their data, but it becomes a real public relations nightmare if that privacy data is leaked in some way. So let me give you some examples. Let's say that your website utilizes a tracking cookie of some sort, where you keep track of your consumers' movement on the site, certain actions that are taken. What do you do with that information? And do you disclose what you're going to do with that information? How do you collect data, and what are your policies regarding that data? Consumers typically don't mind sharing data as long as they understand how it's going to be used. They also want to know if you're going to share that information with third parties. So you might collect data from me, and I'm fine giving it to you, but I don't want you giving it to someone else. And you doing that needs to be something that you disclose to me. Now, anything related to children is covered very specifically in the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So that is a piece of legislation that you might want to become familiar with if you're working with children in any way. And then we have mobile data. This is an area that is only coming into play recently with the proliferation of mobile devices. For instance, using a mobile device, you can track my location, my physical location. So the other day when I was in the mall, I was walking past a Foot Locker, and instead of going into the store, I passed the store, and I wasn't even 10 feet away when I received a text on my phone with a Foot Locker coupon encouraging me to turn around and go back into that store. So they obviously knew my location, and they were sending me a text based on that information. Now, I may or may not feel positive about that, but that is information they have about me, and they're utilizing it for marketing purposes. The bottom line is that you're going to do yourself a favor by having a very clear privacy policy that is enforced consistently, and training all of your social media team members on that policy so that they know how things are supposed to work. Our final topic in this lesson is on defamation. Defamation is generally defined as a false published statement that injures the reputation of a person or a business. And there are two main types of defamation. If it's written, we call it libel. If it's verbal, we call it slander. And since in the social media world most things are in writing or posted, the defamatory content would be called libel. Now, when you think about it, there's two directions from which this could occur. One of your own employees or social media team members could post something injurious on social media, or one of your consumers or audience members could actually post something injurious on social media. And you have to be prepared to handle both situations. What happens when the defamed party finds out that this has been posted, regardless of which direction, they're going to want to address this legally, and they have the ability legally to sue the party that made the comments about them. Luckily, in social media, posters are held accountable for what they say, not the owner of the platform. So, for instance, if somebody outside of your organization posts something that is libelous, you are not held responsible for that. However, you might be held responsible for taking the content down and not continuing to, allow it to propagate. If someone chooses to litigate, they can obtain a court order and have the provider of the social media platform required to reveal the identity of who posted the libelous information. Even if it's an anonymous poster, IP addresses can be tracked, and there are things we can do to find out who posted the material, although it can be difficult sometimes. And so, as part of your social media policy, you need to have a clearly visible proper use policy that states what's acceptable and what is not. And you need to have a way to monitor any activity that is posted by your own people, but also a way of monitoring comments and enforcing this policy to external folks as well. Now, if this happens, your policy also needs to address the response. And so, yes, we're going to have rules in place to try to mitigate it even happening. But if it does happen, how are we going to respond to it? Are we going to quickly take that content down? Are we going to have swift actions taken against an employee? Are we going to assist law enforcement if they're going to go after somebody who is external to our network and post something libelous? All those things need to be a part of your social media policy. This has been a long lesson, and there is a lot to know. Keep in mind that you have those checklists provided by socialmedia.org, and there are many great articles and resources on the internet about the laws that govern social media. So this is a very critical part of becoming a well-versed social media strategist. I want to demonstrate how Creative Commons works. So I'm taking you to the internet, bringing up my browser, and I've already gone to creativecommons.org. You can see that if you are a person who's wanting to license your work, you could go up here to licenses and get information on actually licensing something that you have rights to. But I'm going to scroll down to this Explore area and notice that I have the capacity to find Creative Commons licensed works. Again, these are free, so I'll click on that button. And let's pretend that I'm writing, for commercial purposes, a blog about butterflies. And I want to find an image of butterflies that I can modify a little bit. Maybe I want to have a certain color scheme on the butterflies. So I want it for commercial work. I want to be able to modify it. I'm checking both of those boxes, and I'm going to type in butterflies. And because I'm looking for images,